As I'm currently painting my own boat, the question arose on how to protect all my hard work and all my sanding and sanding and sanding to make sure that lasts as long as possible after I put new paint on it. In my case, Petit Easy Epoxy. So of course I headed over to the Practical Sailor archives in search of some advice. Today we're talking about polishing and waxing. Before digging into the topic, I should mention that there are those, like tech editor Drew Fry, aka our chief penny pincher, who question the value of polishing and waxing a gel coat hull quite often. In Drew's view, keeping the boat clean is usually good enough, and that if you were to compare, say, a 10-year-old gel coat that's been meticulously polished 2 to 4 times each year to one that wasn't polished at all until its 10th year, the only observable difference would be a thinner gel coat on the boat that was frequently polished. So if you just want the minimum effort and don't need a boat to be in showroom condition all the time, which I suspect is probably most of us, just keeping the boat clean and maybe give it a good polish and wax every 2nd year or 5th year or whenever you have the spare time and energy. An important way of thinking that I use to understand the madness that is the boat waxing and polishing world, because it gets very complicated with different machines and RPMs and compounds and buffing pads, and the information is endless and I just can't process it all. For my brain to understand it, I think of everything as sanding. I understand 40 grit, I understand 80 grit, 120, 220, 400 it on to 800, etc. Finer and finer until the finish is whatever I'm sanding is so smooth that it's like glass. Well, polishing can be thought of in the same way. It's just way beyond a sandpaper grit. Using a soft cloth or buffing pad and some sort of compound, usually like a white paste, is the ultimate level of sanding, as fine could be. Do it too much and you sand down the finish too much. Too fast of a machine and it burns the finish up. Some compounds are kind of aggressive grits and some are extremely fine. When I think of everything as sanding like that, it's much easier for me to digest. Your waxing job will have 3 basic steps. Cleaning, this includes getting rid of salt and dirt and grease and mold and stains from your boat's finish. You could break this down into various stages depending on the hull and the general cleaning and stain removal it needs. Polishing is the second step. This creates the smooth, glossy surface that you're going to want to protect. If you have an old hull, like me, there could be several stages to the polishing process. We tested a box full of polishes, and I'll leave links in the description to those tests. And the third and final step is waxing. This is the application of a thin polymer or natural wax coating to seal and protect your finished gel coat. The important thing to remember is that if your hull is not clean before you begin polishing and waxing, you might drive dirt and salt further into the pores of the gel coat. It's not the end of the world, but you won't get the best results if you do that. For general background, I recommend 2 good reads from our archives, both written by Nick Nicholson, a former editor at Practical Sailor who is now involved in a number of big sailing events, including the America's Cup, Newport to Bermuda race, and the Volvo Ocean race. For a broad look at how the sun affects plastic and why we should protect our gel coat, check out Plastic versus the Weather, the Nature of Losing Battle. For a gel coat care overview, read Nick's piece on restoring an old boat, Offshore Log Gel Coat Maintenance. Note that he polished his boat by hand, which I don't recommend for larger boats, particularly if you use one of the harder paste waxes. They're harder to apply. Most maintenance wax jobs won't need all the steps there. Your biggest investment will be a good polisher. We've looked at various options ranging from cheapos to the mid-price power tools aimed at the automotive market to higher-end tools geared specifically for use on boats. Lately, for polishing, waxing, and buffing, we've been using a DeWalt variable speed polisher, the DeWalt DW849. An inexpensive variable speed polisher from Chicago Electric is also worth looking at. The one we have rattles and hums, but it works. Ours is still working, but it gets used only about twice a year. Harbor Freight also has a 7.5-inch wool buffing pad to match, cheaper than the 3M versions. I generally apply the compound and wax by hand using a basic microfiber round waxing pad. I then use the DeWalt compound to remove the wax. The key is to go very light with the machine at a low RPM. I often will buff again with one of those really soft lamb's wool buffing pads or a microfiber cloth by hand to finish it off. Good polishing pads will tell you what RPM range is suitable. Start at the low end of that range. Local boat maintenance guru Nelson Roberts shared his polishing techniques with us in a recent blog post called Buff Your Hull Like a Pro. When you're washing the boat, do it thoroughly to get rid of any oil and grease. Our recent test of boat soaps found some clear winners, including some environmentally friendly products that can be safely used even if your boat's in the water. Keep in mind, however, that if you want to get rid of your old wax, most boat soaps are mildly formulated, so they're not very good at removing waxes. For removing old wax, in that stage of cleaning, Nick likes Simple Green, which does remove most waxes. He dilutes it as needed. You could do the same with one of the recommended cleaners below in our multi-purpose cleaner test, which includes some eco-friendly choices. Once you're assured you won't be driving grease and dirt deeper into the hull, you can begin polishing or compounding. Be sure to wear protective gear, goggles, and a P95 particulate respirator while doing that step. The process also removes any old wax while you're going. Many wax manufacturers have a specific product that also includes a cleaning component, often petroleum-based, to get rid of grease and dirt before using their wax. Colonite's Boat Cleaner 920 is a good example. How aggressively you want to polish your hull will depend on the hull condition. This bears repeating. If you need an abrasive, start with the least aggressive grit required. On a severely neglected hull, you could ultimately need to wet sand with 800 grit wet dry paper, followed by finer grits, and then the polishing compounds. But to start, first try buffing compound before turning to more aggressive grits. Every time you use abrasive on your hull, you're removing some of the gel coat. If you've been waxing your hull regularly and see no signs of oxidization, you might not even want to buff and skip to micro finishing or waxing. Or you could combine the buff and wax process with a one-step cleaner wax. We've tested cleaner waxes back in 2007. We tested heavy-duty rubbing compounds in 2014, and that report highlights some excellent products like Mirka Polar Shine that will save you a great deal of time if you've got a lot of acreage to buff. Whether you call them buffing compounds or rubbing compounds or polishes, they all work basically the same way. They contain a mild abrasive suspended in a liquid or paste that lightly abrades away surface imperfection and oxidization on your gel coat. The current trend is toward water-based products like Aqua Buff, which contain no petroleum distillates, but this product did not do nearly as well as the others in our test. Whatever compound you use, start with the mildest or highest grit number that you need. Again, you don't want to remove more gel coat than necessary. Now that your hull is shiny, it's time to protect it. We've tested dozens of liquid wax and paste waxes. Generally, the paste offers a harder protection that lasts longer than the liquids, but the liquids are easier to apply and last almost as long. I generally stick with Colonite 885 paste wax. Contributing editor Frank Lanier, who waxed his hull by hand, found it too much work and was quite happy with liquid polymer, usually from Mothers. A number of readers swear by New Finish. I usually use the same tools I use for compounding, although I change to a clean buffing pad. I usually apply the wax by hand using a microfiber pad and then buff it off with a machine. Work in small areas. Don't let Colonite 885, for example, dry too hard or it becomes hard to buff. And don't lay it on too thick. If you work in cooler temperatures, it can be a tough product to apply, but you can warm up the can slightly to soften it up. Usually, I have to go over the hull twice with this stuff to get the shine I want. Sometimes I'll switch to a very soft buffing pad for the last step. To help with your selection of waxes, here's the 1-year report of liquid waxes and the 6-month report on paste waxes, and finally, a resource for choosing non-skid waxes. Jamestown Distributors has a pretty good video on refinishing an old hull with a 3M system. It's pretty heavy on the 3M product ads, but you can do just as well with products from your local Finish Master or similar auto refinishing place. Jamestown also sells a pretty good polishing kit that has everything you need, including the polisher. If you have any questions on this topic or advice you'd like to share, post it down below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you below this video and look forward to your experience waxing your hull and caring for your boat. Also, we're looking for writers. If you'd like to write for Practical Sailor magazine, head over to practical-sailor.com/apply.